Welcome to AV Connect videos, creating a venue image. This session is to illustrate how to create a venue image and how those venue images are used to create venues within the AudienceView application. The first thing we're going to talk about is what is a venue image. It is an image that's used to actually create your venue inside the AudienceView application. It's a minimal representation of what your venue looks like without seats. The seats are actually added, layered on through the application on top of this venue image. It is what is seen and used by your customers online to select seats. So a couple of things to keep in mind when getting started with your venue image. The first thing is that the image has to be a JPEG or a PNG. The second thing is you want it to be high resolution. The user should be able to see row labels fairly clearly. The other thing though, you want to keep it fairly small in your file size so that it loads faster on the website. You'll be working with two types of venue images here. One is referred to as the overview image, and the second is the detailed image. The overview image must be no more than 600 pixels in width, and is used by AudienceView to create magnifying screens to actually zoom into what we call the detailed image. Now the detailed image is a much larger image, and this is where seats are actually layered on top of the image itself. The overview and detailed images work together. They are proportionate to each other. They must be an exact ratio of each other. So for example, 3:1 ratio. If the detailed image is 1800 by 2250 pixels, the overview image must be 600 by 750 pixels. So let's look at an example. So here we have a standard AudienceView pick a seat page on a website, and we're looking at the overview image that's been split into two screens. If we click into one of these screens, we then go down into the detailed image, and it's at the detailed image side that we actually see the seats being represented here by circles. So if we scroll over one of these seats, we can see the seating location. We'll also notice that they're color coordinated, and these are related to what we call price zones, and that is a topic we will take on at another point in time. But if we go back to the full map, we again see the overview. And if we click through on another screen, we go into where we see the seats, and this is our detailed screen. So the overview and the detailed screen. We also see this as well on our best available, but in this case, we only see our overview screen. And as we can see here, there's a particular box that it's trying to fit into, and this box is 600 pixels in width. The height, however, can be variant, and it can go larger than 600 pixels at a time. So if we look at the image itself, which we see is the same as the overview image and the detailed image that we saw on the site, the difference being that there is no screens that are chopping it up, or there are no seats that are being layered over top of this. It's a very minimalistic representation of what the venue actually looks like. There's been some shading in here to add in some 3D feel, but it could be a flat image as well. And it's also very high resolution. We can read the stall numbers, the balcony, and we can also easily read the row numbers. So this leads us into image content. What do you actually want on your image? So you want a seating blocks. As we saw, we don't want individual seating. We want section row to seat to be clearly defined outside of those seating blocks, not within the seating blocks. We also want to see perhaps the name of the venue, particularly if you have more than one venue at your organization. A clear indication of where the stage is in relation to the seats, where accessible seating is, and of course a legend is optional as well. So if we look at another example here, so this is another example of a detailed image. We can clearly see that the seats are not here. There are areas in which the seats can be placed. The sections are labeled clearly, as well as the aisles. The stage isn't labeled as stage. We've put in a physical representation of what the stage looks like, as well as a representation of the stairs. There's also a legend on this map as well, which will indicate where the accessible seating is. This is going to be related to the price zone colors that are going to be used as well. Now let's talk about sizing your detailed image. You want to size your detailed image and get your detailed image ready before your overview image, because it's going to be proportionate to your detailed image, and this is where your seats are laid onto. So your seats themselves, they need 10 pixels of space. If the section block, for instance, has 15 seats, then the section must be 150 pixels. If the venue has 4 sections, then the image needs a width of at least 600 pixels just to fit the seats. And this isn't including any space for rows or any dead space around the sections, as well as a border of any kind around the image. Then you have the option of 3D versus a flat image. So we saw an example of one of those already. Or we can do a curved versus straight for your sections. And we're going to see examples of that. So here's another example of a detailed. In this case, it's an arena. So this is going to be quite a large image. But we do see some commonalities here. We see that the rows are indicated. We see the sections are indicated. We see where the ice is. We can build in areas too as well for accessible seating. But it's fairly generic and clear. With this image, taking consideration its arena, it needs to be quite large. So in this case, the image is 2,500 pixels by 1,825 pixels. So if we're going to be using this now to scale it towards the overview image, we need to come up with a ratio, keeping in mind that we need to have it be 600 pixels in width maximum. So here we see the overview image. We can see this is much smaller. So when we resize this, I just did the width down to 600 pixels. And then that changes the height down to 438, keeping that ratio in mind. One of the other things that you'll notice here, though, is that we have a little bit more information. So because this is the image that you see when you have the full screen, you can add a little bit more detail in it. We could also add colors. We could also put the section names into the middle of the sections. This is because we're going to be splitting this up with screens and then zooming down into the detailed image that we saw just prior. So again, here we see the detailed image, which the seats will then be laid on top of. So let's look at some more examples. So in this case, there's another overview image, and we know that because the section names are over top of the seat blocks. If we see, once we go to the detailed image now, we see that that's been removed. The other thing that you'll notice is that this is a curved image, so trying to give a 3D perspective, but we could also see in this detailed that it has the stage is indicated as well as where the accessible seats are. Now, if we go into the next one, this is more of a flat image. So taking a look at the flat image, again, an overview, and then going into the detailed image. The one thing that you'll definitely notice about all of these images is that they're very monochrome. Again, this is very much because we are laying the seats over top of it as well as the price zones, so we don't want those colors to interfere with what we see on our images. So a couple of examples of how you can work with that. And you'll also notice that the image here is curved. So the curved images are very useful. It makes a more realistic presentation of your venue. But we see in this next example that this one's a little bit more flat. We don't have the extreme curves that we see in the other two examples. But even still, we see that it's still very monochrome. We still will see where the stage is, where the accessible seats. We see that the labeling of the sections are outside. It is an overview, so you can put the names of the sections into the seats, but once you zoom in, those will again need to be going away. Talking about the difference between your curved and the flat sections comes into more of when you're testing it. So we'll get into that a little bit more when we take a look at testing your venue image in the next session. But one last example before we leave. So again, here is another example of an overview image. This can also be used as a detailed image, but this is an example of table seating. So we can not necessarily be doing venues of stadiums and things like theaters. We also do tables as well, which you can see in this example. And with that, that brings us to the end of today's session. So I invite you now to try this yourself. And if you have any questions, to reach out to your business analyst. Thank you and have a good day.